Hello, this is part 2 of the stat button tutorial, and if we go to the stat menu right now by hitting our stat button, we're going to focus on the calc menu in the stat window. Now you'll see there's several options here, and the ones that we're really going to focus on in this tutorial are going to be the first one, which is the one var stats, and the fourth one, which is the line reg, ax plus b. So stay tuned. In this session, we're going to focus on the first option in the calc menu underneath the stat button, which is the one variable statistics. Now before we get started, I just want to go over to my edit and hit enter just to show you that I'm going to be using the same set of data for my L1 as I did in previous sessions. So let's evaluate that data now. I'm going to hit stat, I'm going to go back over to calc and choose choice 1. Now by default, the calculator will look at list 1 automatically. However, I always tell my students that just to be sure that the calculator is looking where you want it to look, you should always enter in what list you're using. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go second one, which brings up my L1, and hit enter. And you'll notice all this information comes up. Now let's look at all these items. The first item is the X bar, which is the average of the data, which is 27.5. Now the next two items are summations of the data. The first one is taking all these values and it's just adding all these values together. So it's taking 10 plus 25 plus 5 all the way down the line and it gets the sum. The second one is the summation of all these values squared. So it's going to take 10 squared, which is 100, add it to 25 squared, which is 625, and so on and so forth down the line and get that sum. The next two items are deviations. The first one is a sample standard deviation, and the second one is the population standard deviation. Our next item, N, represents the number of data that was entered into the list, which is 10 items. Now you notice this arrow's right here. That's because there's more that the calculator wants to tell us. So if I arrow all the way down, you'll notice that, well, I'm not all the way down yet. There we go. You'll notice that I have 4 or 5 more pieces of information here. The next one is the min-x, which is the lowest value in this data set, which is 5. Q1 is the first quartile, which is 15. The MED, which is median, is 27.5, and then quartile 3 is represented by Q3, and then the max x is the maximum value, or the highest value I have in my set of data. For this session, I'm going to show you how to construct a frequency table using your list editor, and we're going to evaluate that using the one variable statistics. So let's get started. Let's go to stat, hit enter to bring up my list menu, and then I'm also going to be using a different set of data than from previous sessions. If you notice in this set of data I have repeating values. For example, there are 3 10s, 2 25s, looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 5 30s, and 1 5 and 1 50. Now I could just enter in all these values separately, or if I want to, I can construct a frequency table. So I'm going to hit enter 10, and if I go over here, I'm going to put in this column how many of these values I have. So I'm going to hit 3 because I have 3 10s, and then I'm going to go back and hit 5, hit enter. I'm going to go over here and I have 1 of those, and then my next value is 25. Enter, 2 of those, and 30, which I said I had 5 of those, and our last value, which is 50, and I have 1 of those. So I hit enter. Now when I go to evaluate this set of data using the one variable statistics, I'm going to go over to calc. I got to be careful and really be sure that I enter in the list that I'm using. So I enter in L1 because that's my first list I'm using. I'm going to hit comma and I'm going to enter in L2. So what the calculator is going to do, it's going to look to list 1 for the values, and it's going to look to list 2 for how many of those values we have. So we're going to hit enter, and you'll see it brings up the same pieces of information that it did for when I just did it with one list. It has the average, the summations, the standard deviations, the number of data that I have, and if I arrow down, it has the min, quartiles, medians, and the maxes. In this session, we're going to go over the fourth option from the Calc menu underneath the Stat button, which is linreg, which is short for linear regression. For this session, we're going to use this table down here. So take a second and enter in to your L1 these x values right here, and enter in the corresponding y values in your L2. Okay, so I have my values entered into my table, and before we move on, just be sure that every x value is lined up with its corresponding y. For example, I have the 2 lining up with the 6 down here in my table, and I also have the 2 lining up with the 6 in my list editor. So let's go and choose that option from the Calc menu, linreg, which is choice 4. And here we, again, just like we did with the frequency table in my previous session, we got to specify which list we're using, second L1 and second L2. And when I hit enter, what happens is it spits out this information right here, which is the equation for the line. Now you'll notice I put the equation for the line down here, y equals 1/2 x plus 5, just to show you that when I entered this data into my calculator and used this option, linreg, it spit out the same information. My slope down here was 1/2, up here it's 0.5, which is the decimal form of 1/2, and the intercept down here was 5, which the intercept up here was also 5. In closing, I just wanted to point out that there were several options from the Calc menu underneath the Stat window that we didn't use. If you arrow down on this menu, you'll see there's several other different types of regressions that may be useful at this level. If you have any questions about any of these other options, please send them my way.